Welcome to this edition of Rattling the Bars. I'm Master Moves, the co-host with Eddie Conway. And as I always do, I always update everyone on Eddie Conway. And hopefully at some point in time, Eddie Conway will be making a cameo appearance on this network that he loved and his program that he created. And we look forward to that. Today we have no stranger to Rattling the Bars, an extraordinary black woman who's well versed on all things civil, all things human rights, all things activists. Introduce yourself to the Rattling the Bars,
Hi.
Olayemi.
Thank you for having me. Hi, my name is Olayemi Olurin, and you can call me Olay. I am a movement lawyer and a political commentator.
Okay, and very astute at both. All right, so today we're going to be talking about Rikers Island. And for most of us that don't know where Rikers Island is at, Rikers Island is in New York. But more importantly, Rikers Island is uh, is a jail. It's not a prison. It's a detention center. But Rikers Island is has the same characteristics and the same sense of inhumanity that a concentration camp has. And here today to talk about some of the things that's going on in Rikers Island is Olayemi. Now, recently, uh, a report came out. Somebody smuggled some pictures out of the jail of men that were being held in a holding cell without no toilet and out no facility. And because they was being held in there so long, they started defecating on themselves, or they just started pulling their pants down and defecating in any area that they could find, as opposed to defecating on themselves. This is just one of the things that shocked the consciousness of the city to make the city come to grips with, or we have to do something about Rikers Island. But more importantly, Rikers Island has been under a consent decree, a court order to change the conditions that exist since 2015. Recently, the court uh, judge held a hearing on the violation of the consent decree for the umpteenth time, and in regard to like what should be done, he gave the Division of Correction or Department of Correction and Extension to come up with a solution or try to honor the terms of the consent decree. Ole, talk about what's going on with Rikers Island.
Okay, so Rikers Island is a place whose infamy precedes it and actually works against it. Because Rikers is so infamous, people often make the mistake of thinking it's this high security prison for big bad people accused of the worst things, when in actuality, Rikers is a pretrial detention center and it's been open since 1932 in New York City. But it was last year that they declared a human rights crisis when 16 deaths occurred last year, and that was the highest death toll since 2013. This year, we are already at 18. So
Mm-hmm.
that's worse than when we recognized it as a human rights crisis. But yet, we've failed so far to get them to make the necessary interventions. Rikers has been under federal monitor for since 2015,
That's
where
right.
Judge T. Swain regularly has periodic updates and issues mandates, all kind of dictates to them to do certain things. And each and every time they find that they have demonstrably failed to be in compliance with any of them. Earlier this year, they had found that more than 12,000 medical appointments had been missed. So that's why you see so many people dying from medical neglect
Mm-hmm.
at Rikers. So what advocates have been pushing for in the last 2 years very heavily is a federal receivership. So a federal receivership doesn't mean the federal government would take over, despite what the name sounds like. A receivership would mean that the judge would have appointed a nonpartisan expert who would be able to come in. They would be agreed upon by both sides. They would come in as a temporary measure where they would be given wide latitude to be able to do away with some of the barriers and union and state constraints that some of these other personnel that are already existing are under, so that they could get it in constitutional compliance. And once that happens, it would automatically revert back to the states. But nonetheless, this at the last hearing for it, the judge still made an opportunity to give them more time, extended it
Right.
yet again, which they've continued to do. They continue to extend it, and every time after every single extension,
Mm-hmm.
not only people die. Like,
That's
there
right.
can't be anything more grave to show us that it's not working, is people are dying. I don't know what else we
Right.
could
Right.
possibly show them.
Right. And in that regard, to push back on to like expound on that concept, uh, is the fact that it's under consent decree, the fact that the court has already found that human rights violations exist, Eighth Amendment violations exist, and the fact that this is ongoing, why do you think that the courts is reluctant to uh, give it, turn it over to a more stringent oversight, as opposed to continue to let, for lack of a better word, the fox remain in the chicken coop?
I think it's at best it's politics, at worst it's depraved indifference to what's happening, right?
Mm.
At the worst it's that they're okay with what's happening, and I think that's a fair conclusion to arrive at. If every single time we have one of these hearings, every time we have an update, more people are dead, and you're still saying that's not enough, let's continue to extend it and give them more opportunity. So it's that, or it's that they don't want to be seen as an enemy of Eric Adams and the commissioner of Rikers and these people that are pushing to keep it this way, because despite the fact that there's been a campaign to close Rikers since 2016, and Eric Adams himself said that he would get on board with the campaign
Mm.
to close Rikers because he recognizes that Rikers needs systemic change. He said that Rikers was completely out of control when it was under De Blasio. We're at more deaths, and yet he opposes. He has expressed skepticism that they can actually close Rikers because he says the Rikers population is too high, which is also a reflection of him pushing back against bail reform and every effort made to decarcerate it. But now he's using that as a self-fulfilling prophecy for why he doesn't want to close Rikers, why he doesn't want to decarcerate Rikers, and why he doesn't want a receivership. So I think there is a lot of political things happening behind the scene that makes people not want to be in opposition with the mayor.
And then the latest developments, and they just had a hearing, I think last week or this past, and
November 17th.
right, the latest developments, and this is like beyond my imagination, is that you want them to do a study or submit a report on the lack of compliance with or your expectation of what's to come. And at the same token, you don't want to make it, you're going to do a study on what's going on, and you don't want to make it public because you're saying that you don't want it to be misconstrued or not adequately interpreted. But
Mm-hmm.
to your point, what is more adequate evidentiary wise than the deaths?
Right.
Speak on this and why do you think they're taking this position of like keeping this report when it's going to become, if it's becoming the public domain, it's going to be subjected to ultimately being seen by the public. But
For
why
the
do you think they're
same
reluctant?
for the same reason that they put jails at a site where they make it economically unfeasible for us to get the jails, for the same reason they make it difficult to enter jails to visit your family and your loved ones, for the same reason they don't want incarcerated people to be able to call us conveniently or record or have phones or have any ability to tell us what's happening inside, for the same reason that the courts are open to the public but yet we're not allowed to record what happens there, because they know the public would be, if the public knew how these systems actually worked, if they knew what was happening in Rikers, they wouldn't support it. It's that simple. It's the reason why when we put out those photos, we immediately see backlash. You see them get out and say, "Oh, we're shocked, or we don't know how this is happening," and they try to distance themselves from something that they already know. Every actor involved knows what's happening each and every day, and it's because if the public saw what this pretrial detention center was doing in Rikers, if they saw what it looked like, what the people were being subjected to, if they saw what people were there in a city of 10 million people, 42% of whom are white, why is this pretrial detention center filled of 90% black and brown people? If people could see that, if they got the numbers, if they actually heard the horror stories, they wouldn't go for the lies and the excuses and the placating that they've been giving us thus far to continue out this practice.
And let's examine, because you made mention of it earlier about this the misnomer of that Rikers is the new Alcatraz. There's maximum security, a supermax type prison. But talk about the difference between a detention center and a maximum security facility,
Mhm.
and juxtapose those two things for us.
So something people don't realize, there's a difference between jails and prisons, despite the fact that we use the words interchangeably. But jails are people haven't been convicted of crimes. That's where people are being held. Rikers is a
Mm-hmm.
pretrial detention center, a jail, meaning at Rikers in specific, over 85% of the people incarcerated at Rikers have not been convicted of a crime, have not had a trial. Versus a prison, you're at a prison, you're incarcerated at a prison when you have been convicted of a crime. So that is the difference between the two.
Right. And now in regard to that, we find ourselves in a situation where men and women are being held in pretrial detention in the most horrendous conditions, which automatically open the doors up for them to take a plea agreement or for minor charges just to get out of Rikers. How long?
Absolutely.
What's the average amount of time a pretrial detainee stays in Rikers before they go to court? Do you know?
People can they spend years in Rikers. They over a year is probably an average time a person is spending in Rikers because that's how long cases. The funny thing about the criminal system is that most cases never see trial ever at all, right? They never see trial, they never see hearings are resolved some other kind of way. But if you have the ability to hold somebody in jail until they have a trial, then you have the ability to carry out and prosecute a case and carry it out longer and make someone feel pressured to take a plea or to resolve a case in a criminal way that they otherwise wouldn't have because you wouldn't have been able to do it had they been out. So that's the way that they use it. They weaponize it against people. And the interesting is, as much as America has the largest prison population in the world, right? It makes up
Mm-hmm.
5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's incarcerated population because about 2 million people are incarcerated in America. But of those 2 million, 400,000 of those people are being held pre-trial. And that's something we don't realize that much. There are over 400,000 people who have been accused of a crime, who are legally presumed innocent, who have not had a hearing or trial, but yet they've had their freedom restricted. And as much as what's happening at Rikers is a crisis, it's emblematic of what's happening at all of these pretrial detention
Yeah.
centers all around the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah, and that's true because we did a report on in in the South. They're actually they're outsourcing the detention centers and the population in order to for work, like almost like black code.
Yep.
They're using the labor to beef up these rural counties that's
Yes.
losing prisons. But talk
Yeah.
about the mayor. The mayor, now here go a quote from the mayor. He said, "I'm a bit baffled about people who think that the federal receivership of oversight is the end all." The mayor, are the federal prisons and those the poster child of good prisons? So he basically saying that he's opposed to it, but then in the same and out the same voice, he's he got this misconcept that you're dealing with a prison as opposed to an institution where it's supposed to be transitory. Because if you don't have, but for bail reform, but for the fact that a person can't
Hmm.
make bail, then you wouldn't have the population you have right now in Rikers.
Yeah.
But the fact that you don't have a person's inability to make bail, but then you turn around and you're you're one link in a continuous link of mayors that are responsible for the dehumanization that's taking place on Rikers. Speak about the mayor.
It's often unclear whether or not Eric Adams is genuinely uninformed or whether or not he's deliberately making a straw man argument to the public. A federal receivership, and I would hope it's that he's not deliberately uninformed because I would just show just depraved indifference because the
Mm,
information has been made
right,
available to
right,
him
right.
in a massive way. But a federal receivership is not the federal government taking over. And he must know that, but he wants to present it to the public that way. The federal government would not be taking over. The federal government would not be who would be in charge or be leading oversight of Rikers under a federal receivership. That's just the name. But importantly, even if it were, Rikers is already under federal monitor. It's been under federal
Right, that's
monitor
right, that's
since
right.
so that's
Yeah,
immaterial. It's neither here nor there.
right,
He's
right,
presenting a
right.
straw man to the public. But regardless, a federal receivership does not put the federal government in charge. What it actually does is allow a nonpartisan expert that both sides choose to come and do oversight, and it's temporary. No one has ever presented a federal receivership as the end all be all. That's quite frankly precisely what it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be a temporary measure, and eventually the power would revert back to the state. And I want to remind Eric Adams and the public that Rikers is allegedly supposed to be closed by 2026. They said they're delayed till
That's what they
2027.
say, that's right.
So a federal receivership and all the other efforts meant to help decarcerate Rikers are supposed to move us along to an end, a stated goal our own mayor has, purported to support. So what Eric Adams is saying is nonsensical as it usually is.
And then right there, let's pick up right there. If you already been if it's been mandated that you want that this uh decadent, inhumane cesspool is going to be closed uh, in 27, then all right, why are we at this stage right now when we know we have a monitor? The monitor been there since the consent decree came out in 2015. So and the
Yeah.
purpose of the monitor And you can take this further. The purpose of the monitor is to monitor whether or not the terms of the consent decree are actually being implemented. So now
Absolutely.
the terms of the consent decree, and I was in the Maryland prison system, and we had a consent decree where to reduce the population, and in lieu of reducing the population, certain things supposed took place. When those things didn't take place, we filed a motion to enforce the
Yeah.
consent decree, which got us back in court. All right, but talk about this the relationship between the monitor and the fact that what is the monitor doing? Does the monitor sleep on the job? Was he not monitoring? Because while we
No.
having 18 deaths, while we have the same conditions that was found, they sued about.
Yeah.
While we having this conversation about giving them an extension on something that's already been resolved.
Right. It's honestly, it's a reflection of the unfortunate truth about our entire criminal system, right? Like laws only matter if they are enforced and who they're enforced against, right? And it's the same way that like murder is illegal, but police kill people every day and all
Right.
these different things, and we know it and we see it in some video, but they don't enforce it. So it's like, the monitor is there monitoring the situation at Riker. We're right. We're not unaware. We know it's happening. There were every time the monitor is giving the update, like, hey, still not in compliance. Worse
Yeah.
than the last time. 16 deaths the last time, 18 deaths the last time. They're just choosing to
Yeah.
continue to do nothing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, and you know what, and really, the reality is, like you say, it's the monetization of Rikers, and then that's really the reality, right? And the
Yeah.
deliberate indifference to it. But then let's examine the other part of the equation. Then you have the officers who are like they didn't up the brutality,
Absolutely.
they didn't up the debauchery, they didn't
Uh-huh.
up the insane, they stressed out, they traumatized, and yet where are their union at in terms of saying like, man, get me the hell up out of here?
And here's the thing about the Department of Corrections. The Department of Corrections has perpetuated this myth that they are understaffed as a means of justifying the abuse and the neglect happening at Rikers, and as a means of centering themselves as the people who need more help or need more resources. But let me tell you what's actually happening.
Come on.
First of all, we have about 5,000 people incarcerated at Rikers. Rikers is a facility only built to hold 3,000 people, but we have about 5,000 people there. Nonetheless, we have more than 7,000 officers. We have way more, literally thousands more corrections officers than we have incarcerated at people at Rikers.
Right.
And they are taking illegal sick outs. This is what's important. People keep saying, oh, the officers are calling out sick. Right. Right, but they're not. They're abusing their union contract, and they're abusing the existing protocols in order to call out sick, to continue to get paid, and to make the incarcerated people at Rikers suffer for it, and then to now call for more resources. So it's not an actual this situation with the corrections officers are self-made. They are manipulating and abusing the system to their advantage, and so that they can get more. It's not a coincidence that while all the budgets are being cut, right, NYPD still got more and Rikers has still got more, right? NYPD gets about $10.4 billion and Rikers gets about $860 million. All of those numbers were increased under Eric Adams, even though we cut everywhere else. But they are using these kinds of myths that they propagate in order to do it, when these illegal sick outs are a reflection of the fact that we need a receivership. Because like I said, they don't actually have the ability. The state municipalities have their hands tied. They're tied between these union contracts and all these other political arrangements, agreements that have existed. But a nonpartisan expert under a federal receivership would not be bound by that, and they would be able to fire these officers. They would be able to hire new. They would be able to get all these resources, locks that are not, they have people being held in shower stalls in Rikers where they can't get locks on cells, exposing people to more danger and all these different things. A federal receiver would be able to come in and do something about that. But these corrections officers, ain't nothing wrong with them other than they are neglectful, depraved, and that's what it is.
And you know what? I'm reminded of a case, Wolf vs. McDonald, that came up with the case that started the adjustment procedure. And Thurgood Marshall said in the opinion, said it's no iron curtain between the constitutional rights of prisoners and prisons. There's no iron curtain. But the way I'm looking at, where I'm seeing Rikers, and the fact that it's been like this for like going on a century, the fact that it's been the most depraved institution on the East Coast, probably, is
Yeah.
that it is an iron curtain between prisoners and the Constitution, because you have you have like a consent decree came out, uh, Eighth Amendment violations, cruel and unusual punishment, 14th Amendment violation, no due process, a whole host of medical, and yet the courts, the very court that's responsible for overseeing and ensuring that our rights are adhered to, is like postulating and acquiescing and really doing nothing, doing a goddamn
Right.
thing. Speak on that.
Because honestly, people don't want you to arrive at the logical conclusion, but the logical conclusion is that they're okay with what's happening, right? They have the ability, they're in charge of overseeing it, they're aware of the information, they have the ability to do something about it, and they refuse to do it. And it might seem, maybe that's harder to believe if you think, oh, it's just Rikers, and then Rikers seems like a standalone, inherent, abhorrent, ideation of the system, and that's why this is happening, and they don't know what to do about it. But when then you think about it like this, and you think, all right, Rikers is infamous, and you think Rikers is one of the worst places on earth. It's a human rights crisis. It's so bad. And then you realize that, hey, in Harris County,
That's
21
right.
people died,
That's
right?
right.
So
That's
everything
right.
that's happening in Rikers is happening in Harris County. It's
That's
happening in
right.
Cook County. It's happening in LA. It's
That's
happening
right.
in all these urban
Right.
places where,
Right.
despite these large white populations, they have filled black and brown jails. And then it lets you realize, hey, actually, this is the way that our system is operating, right? On purpose.
And me and Max was talking about this, and we came to this conclusion that we know we know it's a gladiator school. We know it's dangerous, but it's to our advantage to leave it like that, because it keep us employed. It keep us being able to siphon off money from in the budget for much needed things like school, education, and housing, and give it to the unions and give it to contractors that's responsible for maintaining the inhumanity that exists in
Yeah.
Rikers. Olayemi, you got the last word on this here. What
It's
but before you say that, what talk about what some of the things that the movement is doing, or the community is doing, because we didn't explore that. If anything that you know of.
Listen, it has been there is a collective effort. There is a collective effort because Rikers is a part of the shared reality of Black and Brown New Yorkers. That's just the reality. As no matter how much we're talking about it, Rikers and just NYPD and the criminalization of Black and Brown New Yorkers is ever present. So, like you said, Rikers has existed since for almost a century. So nothing that we're advocating for now is new. There've always been community advocates making us aware of this situation and what needs to be done. It's just about how much national attention we're able to get to it, because this is the thing people forget. Awareness isn't for the people that are perpetuating the injustices.
That's right.
They
That's
know.
right.
They know. Awareness is for the public, because the people perpetuating the injustices only care about what the public is going to have a problem with, because that's how they maintain their power, right?
Right.
So for us, what we're at this point, what we're trying to do is, you know what? They know what's happening there. They know. They know. If maybe once upon a time they could pretend that they didn't know. The judges don't go there. They don't see it. But we know now. We have pictures. We have monitors. We have evidence. We have the stats. Everything has made it abundantly clear. So where we're at right now is trying to expose it to the public, trying to get the public to get behind it, because there's a reason why now we've been talking about receivership. We've been fighting for that. I've been fighting for that since last year. Advocates, and at one point in time, no one had ever heard about it. So
Right.
now, even though he's lying about it, he's forced to address it, right? Eric Adams.
Right.
Now you get the national attention mobilized around it when you show people, hey, look at the pictures. Look at these pictures will be found. Look at these monitors. Look at these stories. So what we're doing as a community, as advocates, as organizers, is trying to get the word out about what the reality is of Rikers and what can be done, because oftentimes people feel like, whoa, that's so sad, and what can I do? And they feel their hand shackle when they think, oh, close Rikers, they can't do anything to get it closed today. But a receivership, these different efforts, decarcerating, supporting bail reform, that's how we decarcerate Rikers, and that's how we get us to closing Rikers. So right now, that's what we're doing on the ground.
Okay. And you know what? And that's a good way to end this. Because we recognize that, and you made this observation that throughout the United States, the prison industrial complex is multifaceted. You got
Yep.
but the detention centers in this whole conversation, the detention centers represent a part of the prison industrial complex that is the most inhumane and brutal, because a person is innocent until proven guilty, and
Yep.
only reason a person is in a detention center is because they can't pay bail in most
Absolutely.
cases, not because of the crime they committed, but because they can't post bail
Exactly.
because they poor black and or poor brown or poor period and can't afford it. But the reality that's our reality, and we advocating that they close records. We advocating that the things that you just outlined, bail reform. We advocating that that just monitor that they replace him or get somebody else in that place so that we can get
Yes.
stop having this conversation about people dying in Rikers. Thank you,
Right.
Ole, for joining us and educating our audience about what is going on in Rikers. And we pray that and hope that at the end of the day that we everybody come to the realization that Andrew Davis say, if they come for me in the morning, they're gonna come for you sooner or later.
Yeah.
So don't be in the sooner or later uh, narrative. Stand up and speak out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we like to encourage everyone to continue to support Rattling the Bars and the real news. As you can see, this is really the real news. You're not getting this kind of information about Rikers Island or the abuse and inhumanity that's taking place in a county jail, not a prison, not where somebody has been convicted and is serving his time, but somebody's waiting to go to trial and could possibly be found not guilty. But in the course of being found not guilty, could actually be executed by someone in the prison or by an officer. Thank you very much, Ole.
Thank you.